Our guest this week is Rick Timmins. Rick is a veteran angel investor and financier with a fascinating career. He served in senior roles with Motorola and Cisco at the height of their powers, was a semi-pro poker player, and today sits on 5 boards, including the Angel Capital Association. We talked about the craft of angel investing, the potential rewards and pitfalls, and some of the lessons Rick learned from his decades of experience as a tech executive. Please enjoy. Rick, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Joe, for inviting me, and I look forward to our discussions today. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, I've enjoyed when we've spoken in real life, so doing on the show should be fun. In preparing for the show, I learned that there is an actor named Rick Timmins with only one credit to his name, who was in the 2003 TV movie Word of Honor. Don Johnson was the star. I have to ask, you've got a varied career. Please tell me you were the same person who played Wounded Soldier 3 in the movie Word of Honor.
Joe, I'm sorry to disappoint you. That is not me. And the fact that you're telling me this is information that I am hearing for the first time. So unless there's technology that clones me and I don't know about it, I can confirm to you that that was not me.
You were not Wounded Soldier 3.
No, sir, I was not.
But you are Rick Timmins, the angel investor. I do
yes,
have.
Sir, I am.
Yes. Okay, correct. You were also while not an actor, did I read correctly that you were a semi-pro poker player for a stretch in Vegas?
Yes. So from 2007 through 2009, when I retired from Cisco Systems, I had a second home in Las Vegas. And I had been playing poker just as a casual hobby for many, many years, but I got really into it while living in Las Vegas. And for those 2 years, almost 2.5 years, I would go to work at 6:30 in the evening and leave my job at approximately 2:30 in the morning. And I would play in casinos, and I studied how to play. This is Texas Hold'em. And I got pretty good at it. My hourly win rate was pretty good. And it's just like anything else. If you study it, practice it. And I got mentored by a poker player for several months. And it was very entertaining. Got a little boring at the end. I still play casually and have a little fun with it. But those 2 years that was my job, so to speak.
Did you find that the pickings were better after midnight than earlier in the evening?
They were, and they were also a little better depending on the time of year. So the holidays, vacation times of year brought in a lot of the tourists, and those tourists brought their money and the opportunity for me to try and win it.
Remove them of their excess funds.
Yeah, and when I was playing, there was what I call grinders. Probably 50% of the table were individuals, men and women who were doing this as a full-time job or profession. So we always welcomed the tourists that came to the table.
All right. So while I'm tempted to go down a rabbit hole with you on poker, I want to talk about angel investing. So
I look forward to it.
For folks who, plenty of people listening to the show are familiar, but folks who are not, I find when I talk to people about angel investing, it comes up in conversations. The first thing that comes up is Shark Tank. And they're like, oh, I've seen Shark Tank. Can you talk about how real life angel investing is different from what people might see on TV and with Shark Tank?
So Shark Tank has been on for many, many years. And those individuals who participate in that are required to make decisions about investing in one of those companies in approximately 10 minutes. And they ask questions oftentimes that we would ask, but it's quite different. A lot of pressure to do the kind of things that they have to do, literally, as I said, in 10 minutes. When we as angels collectively, particularly those who belong in an angel group like I have for many, many years, Joe, it takes about 10 weeks to make a decision to invest in a company. There's so much that has to be done between the entrepreneur and CEO and the potential investors. And so the time and the ability for us as potential investors to get to know that entrepreneur, the team, and their technology is a very, very important process that takes time and effort and many hours on our part and their part. And by the way, that's very true for venture capital firms. When they invest in a company, it often takes 8 to 10 weeks for them to do the due diligence, do the work, and make the decision to invest once they have an opportunity to see a potential investment. So the time frames and the type of relationship that you develop with these entrepreneurs is quite different when we do it in, quote, the real world as opposed to Shark Tank's TV land.
Okay. All right. Thank you. How did you end up as an angel investor in the first place?
That's a good question. When I worked at Cisco Systems, I joined Cisco Systems in 1995 after leaving Motorola Semiconductor. And I was a finance person. I was the assistant controller, the controller and assistant CFO at Cisco when I joined. And starting in about 1997 or so, Cisco became very acquisitive in terms of companies that we were acquiring, oftentimes early stage companies. And as part of that process, I got very involved in the due diligence of these companies that we would invest in. And over the course of a number of years, I was participating in due diligence on about 60 to 70 of these companies. In my time frame at Cisco, we acquired over 200 companies, but I was very involved in about a third of them, including the opportunity to meet the entrepreneur or the CEO. And I was so impressed about the work efforts, the ideas that they had, the things that they had done to get to the stage where Cisco was potentially acquiring them. It's not in my DNA, but I saw a lot of very impressive things with these entrepreneurs, and that stuck with me when I left Cisco in 2007, and I had an opportunity to do activity after leaving the poker world and moving to Austin. I joined a venture capital firm here in town, became a venture partner for 2 or 3 years, working with entrepreneurs and startups. So the track that really got me here was the involvement that I had with many entrepreneurs and the impressive nature of these entrepreneurs while working at Cisco.
What do you enjoy most about angel investing?
I think meeting the entrepreneurs, learning about their business and technology, and the opportunity to have them make a difference, to have them grow, to have them become successful. That doesn't always happen, as you'll know, and I'll share some statistics with you later. Many companies fail, but the opportunity to create success is so interesting and so compelling to me that I enjoy doing it. And you can be, and it's also financial rewards that come with it also, but it's that ability to be at the forefront of doing something that's new, different, and creating the opportunity for others to be successful in new paths and new ideas. And you think, geez, in many ways, all the new things that could possibly be done have been done. And that is so not true. These entrepreneurs and the opportunity for us to invest in them is there every single day and will be for generations to come.
You've been involved with the Central Texas Angel Network, CTAN, as you call it in
Yes,
Austin, for a long time. You were chairman for many years. Can you speak to, and you did a little bit about angel networks, kind of expand on the role that angel networks play and for founders and for investors?
That's a good question. After I left the venture world, after 3 years, I still was very interested in investing in startups. And here in Austin, there's still a very excellent entrepreneurial community and ecosystem here. I saw the Central Texas Angel Network, and I joined in 2011, where I became an angel investor in that network. I learned the importance of working with associates of mine in investing. And that was really very key in helping me create success and helping angels create success. I believe there are many angels who can do this individually and have done it, but the chances of being successful are much more enhanced when you can do it with associates that you can rely on. And the Central Texas Angel Network here in Austin is a very active angel network. There are about 280 angel networks in North America. The reason I know that, Joe, is I am a board member of what is known as the Angel Capital Association, which represents angel groups across the country and Canada. There are 280 of those groups representing about 15,000 individual angel investors. Now, there's probably 10x that in terms of investors, angel investors in the country, but these are the individuals who are doing much more of the serious angel investing through networks such as CTAN. And here at CTAN, we've become quite good at doing it, and it has helped in so many ways for entrepreneurs and investors in angel or seed stage investing to become successful.
What is, again, for maybe someone who's less familiar with angel investing, like what is the sweet spot for when a Rick Timmins invests in a startup as far as their stage?
Yeah, very good question. That happens a lot. And angel investing, there are probably, I'll call it 3 stages of typical investment that angel is making. The first stage is what I'll call the pre-seed round. These are companies that are looking for funding, very typically minimal funding, anywhere from $200,000 to roughly $600,000 to develop a product or service to put in the market pre-revenue. That happens quite a bit, and we see a lot of companies coming to us at that stage. I'll talk about life science companies that don't typically get to revenue when we invest in them at all. But typically software companies, consumer companies, hardware companies are in that stage of pre-revenue. And by the way, they're coming to us for the first time looking for outside money. Typically, they have already had funding, what I'll call FF&F. They've arranged for funding with friends, family, and fools. And that stage of investing, they have gotten to a path that I just described. And now they're coming to us for that pre-seed activity. The second type of funding or stage that will interest a Rick Timmins or an angel investor is what I'll call the seed stage. Typically there, they have some revenue. They have product that's out in the market, and they need to either enhance the product, enhance their marketing, enhance their reach out efforts to customers, or work with other large enterprise organizations. And that kind of round, Joe, is anywhere from $1 million to a $2 million kind of raise of capital. Now, we don't fill that round here in CTAN. We will have to what we call syndicate it or share it with other angel networks. And so that stage is what I call the seed stage. And then the typical final stage of investing with angels is Series A or above. And that is a stage where they have been successful. They are really raising money to continue significant growth paths. And oftentimes that seed A and above will involve, for the most part, venture capital funds and organizations. We will typically invest alongside with them, very small amounts relative to what the venture capital people are looking at. And those rounds can be anywhere from $2 to $5 or even more $1 million. So those are the 3 stages of typical investing that we see in angel opportunities at CTAN, and I would say for the most part across the other angel networks in the country.
How has angel investing evolved since you first started?
That's something that I've seen a lot of changes on. There's many more of companies coming to us now, many more startups, many more individuals who are going through a process that decides that they want to be an entrepreneur. They want to be in a startup company. So compared to 10 years ago or 20 years ago, many, many more individuals believe they have an idea or certainly a willingness to be involved in a startup company. So that's one change I've seen, as many more individuals are doing this. Secondly, I've seen the sophistication of angels get better. We're smarter than we were 10 years ago or 15 years ago. We know how to be better at what I call due diligence and evaluations. We know how to be better at creating term sheets. And so I think the maturity of the angel investing community has evolved over time. It's much better today than it was when I first started doing angel investing 10, 12 years ago.
Curious how you like to engage with your startups and founders after you invest. And part of the reason I bring that up is some angels, it's purely financial. And I think the earlier you are, the easier it is to get away with that. You've been on, I think you're on 5 boards now that I know of. You have such deep experience, a lot of perspective.
Right.
How much do you like to weigh in with your founders? Where do you like to focus on helping them out?
That happens a lot. And so I'll give you the high level perspective of that. So here in CTAN, the Central Texas Angel Network, when we go through the due diligence process in terms of evaluating a company, publish a report, a due diligence report, and ask our members to consider to invest, what happens is anywhere from 6 to 10 or 12 members will write checks individually, and we will make an investment in that company anywhere from $300,000 to $600,000 collectively. What happens, Joe, is that when we make that investment, it's very important for us in the term sheets that we negotiate with them that they form a board of directors. And that board of directors will, in the most cases, when we collectively are investing that kind of money, will involve having one of the CTAN members join that board as a member of that. Oftentimes it's a 3-person board. It could be an outside director with expertise. It will be an investor and the entrepreneur himself or herself as the board members. They're forming that board for the first time, and that is very, very important. So now we as investors are going to help with the mentoring, the advisory work. Oftentimes, if it's not just a board, it could be an advisory board member. So there is a lot of work post-investment that we do to help ensure that that company can be successful down the road. Board service is one of the key and critical most importance, not just in terms of mentoring and advising, but governance and other practices necessary to be a good company and a good representative to shareholders / investors. And that takes time. It's a big, big lift and an effort. And we've had literally over 100 of our CTAN members over the last 10 or 12 years become board members on these companies that we've invested in. I personally, at one time or another, have been on 11 of these boards post-investment. And many of our CTAN members will do this, and it makes a big difference in terms of our returns because we have calculated the statistics. The returns of companies that we serve on boards versus those that we don't serve on a board and invest in is roughly 7 times higher, 7 times greater when we serve on a board.
Well, I've seen some good data over the years that is very aligned with that as far as performance in angel situations is higher when angels engage with founders and companies more often. It's intuitive, but it makes sense.
It does.
How do you, when you're in, let's say, like a pre-seed seed stage, things are very founder dependent. If you've got a founder that is struggling, you're coaching them, it's not working, but there's still some runway. It's not a case of like financial collapse is imminent, but it's clear that the founder is just struggling and it's not working. But it also might be hard to bring in an external person, a professional, to come into like a pre-seed seed situation. Right. How do you handle situations like that, conversations like that?
That is a difficult conversation to have. So here we're in a situation where, to your point, the entrepreneur is struggling. Obviously the metrics that they had set out to achieve and report to us as goals are not being attained. There are issues with marketing or people or the technology or other issues. And you have to make a determination in your own mind if this person, this CEO, is the right individual to continue to take the company forward. If this person is not, then that is the most difficult kind of conversation that you need to have with that individual to potentially ask them to evaluate their performance and evaluate their likelihood of success that may result in them hopefully agreeing with you that you may not be the right person for that position, and it may be necessary for them to move on and either another internal resource be utilized to step up or an outside person. The chances of creating success in that company in either one of those scenarios is very, very problematic at that point. So you've gotten to a point where you're almost putting the company at risk to keep that individual. And there's also significant risks with bringing in a new outside person or promoting someone inside the company. Either way, it's going to be quite risky and quite challenging. But the evaluation of the ability of the current individual to lead that company needs to be determined by yourself and potentially other investors. And the decision to move forward with replacing that person has to have a conversation with that CEO. It's a very, very tough conversation. I've had to do it 2 times with board service that I have been on to replace the CEO. Difficult conversations to have.
I'm going to take it positive, and we're going to get back. We're going to get in a time machine. I want to go back to your time when you were with Motorola in Japan. You were with, I believe, a company of 23 years.
Yes.
CFO of Motorola Japan.
Correct.
I think company had more than 10x while you were there in that time. I think people might forget, but Japan had absolutely had its moment, on the global stage where American firms were like copying best practices out of Japan.
That's why I went over there. I could not believe how successful these companies in Japan were compared to many of the companies, including Motorola here in the United States. I was so intrigued by what is creating their ability to be more successful at that time than American companies.
What did you find was the most underlooked factor with that?
I would say it was, I think it was a combination of 2 things. One, it was their work ethic then and still today is just off the charts excellent. But also they had an ecosystem of working together in terms of collaboration between the government, between economic agent development groups and the private sector that created I'll call it a unique situation at that time, at least, to have success. I think many cities, many states, even the federal government here in the United States has learned a lot about that, and a lot more collaboration occurs between those kinds of organizations here in the U.S. that did not exist, believe it or not, in the 80s and 70s, and even going into the early 90s. Now we all take it for granted that there's that collaboration. That was embedded in Japan probably 25 years before I got there.
You were VP of Finance at Cisco at a point in time when Cisco's most valuable company in the world,
right,
through the dot-com bubble. What lessons stuck with you from riding that wave and that experience?
Oh boy, it was just a tremendous wave. I was fortunate to be part of it. When you say lessons, we were making history. So the lesson I had was how we became so darn successful with our technology, products, and services at that time, and we continue to get better. So we had a leadership team at Cisco with John Chambers as our CEO and other senior executives that created such a wide acceptance of our products and technology, and to be a part of that wave. The learnings is, yes, we did it. Now other companies are doing it. You see it with obviously now Apple, Microsoft to some extent, NVIDIA, Tesla, and others. But we were a company that went public in 1991, and 10 years later, we're the most valuable company in the world. It was an amazing ride. and one that proved that that can be done. And now, even to this day, it's happening as we speak.
The boom at that point, kind of what I'm seeing with AI today, as far as technological regime change and also startup valuations, kind of echoes a lot of, call it very late 90s. I'm curious from your perspective how the rise of AI is changing how you think about investing, or not changing, whichever path you want to go.
It's a good question, because it seems as if, I'll say, a third to 40% of the companies that are applying to C10 today have some kind of AI component to what they're doing. So obviously it is something that is going to continue to grow and become much, much more important in the years to come than it is now. And people are already utilizing it. But I think the technology in AI and what it can be going forward for large enterprise organizations and startup companies that are wanting to capitalize with the technology are going to be very, very important. It hasn't created a significant rise in what I call the pre-money valuation of companies, but it has created many, many more opportunities for companies to pursue solutions using AI. And the open source ability of what AI is going to change the things that we do in our lives in the next 10 or 15 years. So I am a big, big proponent of it and look forward to seeing the technology evolve over the years to come.
I'm likewise flooded with AI pitches, and a question I have with a lot of them is, is this a feature that's sitting on top of someone else's platform? And,
right.
Apple recently had their demo day where they showed new features for the iPhone that are going to be AI enabled. And I joked with a friend that, we're at this stage with AI development where, as a VC, you could commit to a round in a startup. And by the time you tell your LPs that you've made the investment, Apple, Google, or OpenAI could have turned that product into a feature. It's just, right. It's a very, very treacherous time to be deploying, despite what seems like a very compelling time.
It is, and I agree with your comment, but oftentimes when I look at software companies, particularly SaaS-based companies over the years, Joe, I say the same thing. They're developing a feature for a software tool, call it in the real estate space. And oftentimes I ask the question, why hasn't Google or Apple or some other company, Microsoft, deployed this kind of feature in their software already? Are you kidding me? So yes, it may be somewhat exasperated in the AI world, but it's often happened in the technology that we've seen, I'm sure you've seen, Joe, evolving in the software space over these many, many years. It's just now a feature that is almost becoming ingrained in practically every software tool that's getting rolled out today.
What mistakes do you see that new angel investors make?
Boy, one, when people decide to become an angel investor or invest in startup companies, oftentimes they're doing it on their own, or they believe they have the skills and the knowledge to evaluate a company. And so they will make the investment with obviously the knowledge and background they have in their career, thinking that that's going to be enough to ensure that they made the right choice. Oftentimes it's not. They need to have a process that involves really serious due diligence and the vetting of the entrepreneur and the technology. So there's not enough work that's done up front by many people that creates mistakes in decisions to invest. Secondly, I think individuals don't commit the time to do this work, and it's work. People think it's easy, go to a dinner, have a few drinks, see a few pitches, write a check. No, you have to do this over a number of years and create a plan for yourself over, say, 3 to 5 years to invest in a certain number of companies. And that's important because angel investing at that early stage 50% of your companies are going to fail, despite all the good work that you may have done. And so you need to take time, 3 to 5 years, to invest in a number of companies. They don't invest in a number of these companies. I've done Monte Carlo simulation of the angel portfolio at CTAN. It takes approximately 20 investments to ensure that you will have the right amount of companies to have that 1 or 2 home runs that overall in your portfolio will give you a 20 to 25% internal rate of return. And that's what you want to get in this space, because it's a very risky endeavor to invest in startups. So they don't invest the time. They don't take the willingness to be involved in it, and they don't do the work to do it. So time, effort, and involvement to help ensure your success. These are big mistakes that people make. And oftentimes what happens, Joe, is that the failures happen faster. So you fail fast in the 3 to 4 year range. Exits take 4 to 8 years. So they've seen a few failures, they get tired and frustrated by it, and they stop investing. You have to stay the course, and you have to get educated and learn how to be a good angel investor. And I have to tell you, Joe, honestly speaking, when I first got into angel investing, I wasn't very good. I had a pretty good finance background and career. I was not as good an angel investor as I am now. I studied, I read books, I watched events. I went to Angel Capital Association events. I watched my associates at the CTAN organization, and I became a better angel investor.
So we talked about portfolio construction to some extent, talked about mistakes, talked about the importance of winners. How do you approach follow-on investments?
So when we at CTAN train members to invest their capital that's available to them in angel investing, we suggest that they allocate approximately 40% for the seed stage capital, or that first round of capital, and approximately 60% for the follow-on investments. And those follow-on investments should only be made when the entrepreneur and the company are having success, when they're achieving their metrics, when they're continuing to grow, and this capital in the follow-on round is being deployed to continue that successful growth. If the company is missing metrics, if they need this follow-on round because they're running out of cash, or because their ability to be success is now coming into question, pass on that investment. Do not do it, despite the fact that they could go under if you don't provide the capital. So you only invest in the follow-on rounds when they are having success, when they are meeting their metrics, and they will continue to grow, you believe, successfully. So our advice is invest in the good companies, pass in the companies that are not doing the things that they need to be doing, and that's the criteria for your follow-ons.
I did a study on my returns from running funds and money and personal capital, and found that by far the biggest mistakes I've made as far as impact to returns were when I averaged down on investments that weren't going to original plan, and I rationalized, the price is good, there's still something to like, put more behind it, and just by far the biggest detractor to my performance has been that.
I agree, and I did some of that too, Joe. To begin with, I saw companies that were at a crossroads, so to speak, where the valuation may even be lower than the original investment round. And I was able to make a decision that says, I'm going to help this individual and this company get back on track. Those were not successful investments that I made for the most part.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
And it's multiple layers of emotion. In public markets, it's still an emotional decision because it's your capital. But in this case, you're having a founder come to you personally.
Right.
Borderline begging for support.
Exactly.
These are people you've already backed. They put a lot of time, money, heart into what they're doing. Saying no in those moments is pretty difficult.
Yeah. And I see angel investors making the decision to invest in those rounds and in those companies, and I simply won't do it. I'm doing the pass. Sorry, can't do it anymore.
What was your biggest win?
About 3 years ago, I had an exit with an entrepreneur who I evaluated as being, in fact, he was a former CTAN member, and he became a PhD graduate at the University of Texas. And he and another individual started a pharmaceutical company and went public after the lockups expired, and I sold my shares. I had a 70x return on my investment. So that was my largest return. Was a pharmaceutical company, not a technology or software company that I'm quite familiar with because of my background, but I relied on my evaluation of the entrepreneurs and the evaluation of other CTAN members in that space, medical space, and a 70x return I achieved after 6 years investing in that company. And I did a follow-on round with them also.
Which probably treated you pretty well too.
Yes, very well.
Was that, and something I want to ask you about is QSBS. And with the qualifier that this isn't a tax show, this isn't tax advice, but QSBS, Qualified Small Business Stock Exemption, does play a really big, or can play a really big impact on performance for angels. So maybe to tie that back to the win, and I've heard you speak about this before, I'd love for you to kind of riff on QSBS and what it means for investors.
So the Internal Revenue Service, many years ago, this is over 15 years ago, enacted code, and legislation that was passed that created QSBS, Qualified Small Business Stock. And the two primary provisions of this IRS code was that if you invested in a company that was a C Corp legal entity structure, and you held these shares for at least 5 years, and that company was sold or had an exit and created a liquidity event for you, then the gain that you had in that company would be completely tax-free. So, and that's up to $10 million of gain. So you were able, with QSBS 1202, to, in effect, eliminate your taxes or capital gains associated with that kind of investment. Now, that's at the high level, the primary provisions of that law. You can obviously go Google it in and read more about it, but those are the key provisions of it. The second provision was what's known as QSBS 1045. 1045 is another provision of the code that says if you have a gain in a company, you can also have that gain treated as a tax-free investment if you turn around and reinvest that gain within 60 days in another qualifying QSBS company. That gain is deferred. So these two provisions have helped investors in many ways in terms of their taxes. And by the way, there's been legislation proposed by Congress over the years to eliminate QSBS, but it hasn't got out of committee or been approved by Congress. But some Congresses have tried to do that over the years.
Well, it sounds like a tax break, and it is, but it's also primarily an intent. It's an incentive, right?
It is an incentive for individuals to continue to invest in companies like myself and many, many other angel investors who get rewarded for putting forth this capital in the communities that we all are a part of and the entrepreneurs that are out there.
I think people who may not be tax junkies may not fully appreciate the scope of, the value of that tax deferral or being passed on. But I think the simple way to frame it would be a 70x return, which is already pretty massive. If you're able to, through QSBS exemption, avoid paying capital gains tax on that, that's effectively turning into something, rough cutting here, like a 90x pre-tax return.
Yeah, you're right.
So those extra 20 turns is pretty powerful.
Makes a difference. Exactly right. Good point.
What's a conventional view in early stage investing that you think is bullshit?
I think people think that this is easy, that they can be successful at it. I think many people think because they've had successful careers, either as an entrepreneur, by the way, who now is trying to be an angel investor, or a career in an enterprise organization or some business, that skill set that they have is the likelihood that they're going to be successful in angel investing. It's so wrong. You need to work at this, just like you had to work to get to the point where you were in your career or with your startup company. You don't think you have to do anything in angel investing to be good at it? Come on. So I think the biggest misnomer is the fact that people believe that the skills that they've had in their career all automatically qualifies them to be a good angel investor. And it doesn't. It doesn't. You have to do more work at this thing to do it, to become successful. And I think that's the biggest misnomer that I've had to go through and that I've seen in the 10 or 12 years I've been an angel investor with CTAN, and part of all the angel investors I've seen across the country as part of the Angel Capital Association. Big, big misnomer.
And if someone out there, just to wrap things up, is listening, they enjoyed the conversation, they're curious to learn more, what are some good resources you'd point people towards?
Okay, there are good resources. A gentleman by the name of Brad Feld, who started Techstars, has a website and books that he's written. I would suggest you read those. Two super angel investors who are part of the Angel Capital Association, a gentleman by the name of Christopher Barabley and a gentleman by the name of Ham Lord, have written 6 books. You can go to Amazon and find their books about angel investing. 6 different books on angel investing. They're 150 pages each. Read them, learn about them. And then the third resource I would suggest is the Angel Capital Association website, which has so many resources out there, webinars that are done, seminars that are conducted, data that we publish monthly and annually about angel investing. Read it and try and continue your education efforts with the resources that the ACA can provide. I think those 3 things would get you on your track to become successful at this.
Awesome. Well, Rick, thanks so much. It's a really fun conversation.
I enjoyed it so much, Joe. Thank you for inviting me.
Hi, Joe again. Thanks for watching the show. If you'd like more of this in the future, subscribe to our channel. If you'd like to learn more about Seaplane Ventures, just check out seaplaneventures.com. Cheers.